Hi, I'm Dr. Garritt Van Dyk. I'm a lecturer in the History Department at the University of Newcastle, and I'm here to talk to you today about the origins of the friendly societies. For anyone who hasn't studied friendly societies, the ideas that first come to mind are not usually positive. Exclusivity, secrecy, elitism, with rituals and robes that seem out of place with modern society. In this brief presentation, I'll give an overview of where these associations came from and explain their purpose, to demystify the friendly societies and show their historical importance. A mention of friendly societies might make you think of groups like the Freemasons and the popular cultural references that make fun of the robes, hats, and secret handshakes. You might also think about how societies like these are perceived as exclusive in their membership, discriminating on the basis of gender, sexuality, race, religion, or ethnicity. And lastly, there is a perception that these types of organizations exert influence behind the scenes, enabling powerful decision makers to conspire with loyal members of a secret fraternity. The reality of friendly societies was quite different. It began as a form of self-help for working class people, a form of mutual aid to protect workers from falling into poverty. Workers paid monthly dues into a reserve fund that paid out benefits in the event of injury and would cover the cost of a proper funeral in the event of death. By encouraging members to pay into these funds for the benefit of all members, friendly societies were the forerunners of trade unions, insurance companies, and savings banks, promoting financial planning and offering protection against injury and sickness not covered by state-sponsored welfare. The societies also sponsored and provided a social context for conviviality with monthly meetings at a pub and an annual feast and a parade. These organized events also gave members a sense of collective identity that was made respectable through ritual and formalities. Now, you may not have heard of friendly societies before, but they were a prominent feature of 19th century society. In Britain, there were in 1802, there were 10,000 friendly societies in England and Wales. By 1815, one out of every 12 adults was a member of a friendly society, and in 1899, half of all the men in England and Wales belonged to a friendly society. Where did these organizations come from, and why were they so popular? The friendly society evolved from the medieval guild, the craft trade guilds, organizations that controlled how trades were learned, with a strict system of apprentices, journeymen, and masters. Membership in a guild was necessary to acquire skills which were not taught or even revealed to outsiders. This gave guild members a monopoly on production, but it also gave the guilds control over their members. Guilds also looked after members in the event of a workplace injury and provided some kind of financial support in the event of sickness. Guilds, however, lost their monopoly power when mechanization and industrialization changed the way the goods were produced. The printing press made sharing knowledge more efficient through the dissemination of information. Many guild members were not literate and learned their trades through apprenticeship with no written records. Some ambitious artisans, however, left the guilds to work for nobles. In the employment of a royal person, these craftsmen were exempt from guild restrictions on secrecy, and they shared their knowledge with the reading public through printed texts. The monopoly power held by guilds vanished as knowledge spread and industrialization changed the skills required for production. Factories replaced workshops, and workers moved to be closer to their places of employment. Often, this meant moving to a city, away from friends and family. Without the protection of a guild or social network of family and friends, workers turned to each other to form associations for mutual support. It's hard to say with any certainty when the first friendly society was formed, but there is an example from as early as 1555 with the Corporation of Carters in Leith, Scotland. Another possible point of origin was the Society of Friendly Parisians, formed in 1687 by Huguenots. The Huguenots were French Protestants who emigrated to England when a law protecting their religious and civil liberties was revoked in 1685. When the Huguenots arrived in London, they found a society based on the structure of a voluntary insurance association for urban workers and that they had originally belonged to in France. They brought this with them and set up. You can see there's a map there of East London and Spitalfield, and you can see all the different trades and crafts that were brought by the Huguenots. We fast forward a little bit to 1793. The friendly societies were prominent enough in Britain that laws were introduced to regulate their organization. The early societies promoted a level of financial planning as the monthly dues paid by members provided a minimum level of economic security in the event of an accident or illness, and provision to cover the cost of a proper funeral in the event of an untimely death. In practice, this meant that membership in the societies was limited to workers that could afford the subscription, which included wage earners and urban artisans. An era before savings banks and old age pensions, the society offered a way to put money aside for a rainy day. This picture of the Rag Fair, which is in the area that's now Liverpool Street Station, showed the kind of poverty that was being dealt with in London during this period. Now, membership not only kept workers out of the poorhouse, but also offered conviviality in the form of organized social events, with an annual feast and parade as a highlight of the year. Members dressed in special club regalia with sashes and sometimes ceremonial outfits for a parade, followed by a shared meal. On a more regular basis, members attended meetings, usually held at a local pub. The pub provided a meeting space for the society in return for the purchase of a fixed quantity of beer. This was usually reported in the society accounts as rent, definitely in quotation marks, paid for hiring the meeting venue. If only 15 out of 50 members turned up for a meeting, the price for the rent was the same. Either the landlord made a windfall profit, or the dutiful members in attendance had a very big night. The financial goals of the friendly societies met with the approval of upper-class observers in the 18th and 19th centuries, but the feasting, parades, and boozy meetings held in pubs were heavily criticized as a waste of money. The fact that many societies had the local pub owner as their treasurer did not inspire confidence in the financial management of these associations, and savings banks were developed in Scotland and England by clergy and wealthy philanthropists as a more effective method of encouraging workers to put money aside. The temperance movement also encouraged the establishment of alcohol-free friendly societies, offering a sober alternative to friendly societies where beer was normally an integral part of the conviviality. This conviviality at the pub was true even for all female friendly societies, who also held their meetings in pubs. Many friendly societies had separate membership for men and women. Some had both male and female members, and there were others that only had male or female members. In the late 17th century, women's clubs were originally established as pension societies for the widows of tradesmen. In the 18th century, membership in female societies increased, representing 15% of all societies in London in 1794. This trend did not continue, however, and the number of female societies declined, making up only 5% of the total in 1803 and 1% in 1872. It should be noted that there was a disincentive for married women to take up membership in Britain. They could not legally own property, including any benefits from a friendly society, until the Married Women's Property Act was passed in 1882. This picture here in the slide from the Nestor Female Friendly Society, that's a centenary picture in 1914 that's for the society that was originally founded in 1814. So it certainly lasted a good long time. Now that you've got a better understanding of the friendly societies as a working class institution designed to provide a basic level of economic protection and a level of respectability through association and some conviviality through entertainment, the question remains, why do they need secret handshakes and passwords? Following the start of the French Revolution in 1789 and the execution of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette in 1793, all of Europe and Britain feared that the revolutionary violence of the Reign of Terror would spread like a pandemic to infect other countries and threaten the power of monarchs everywhere. The fear was so great that the Habeas Corpus Act, the statute that prevents unlawful imprisonment, was suspended in Britain in 1793. A new law titled the Act for More Effectually Preventing the Administering or Taking of Unlawful Oaths was passed in Parliament in 1797. The law was primarily measured to prevent mutiny in the Royal Navy, but it could also be used to prosecute sedition and treason. The Combination Acts of 1799 and 1800 followed, banning the formation of trade unions and making any type of labor strike illegal. If you remember, Britain was at war from 1793 for 22 years, and there was fear that a strike during wartime would lead to starvation and failure on the battlefield. While friendly societies were not directly targeted under these laws, they were suspected, sometimes with good reason, of being a cover for trade union activity. Secrecy became a necessary part of the society's procedures and rituals, as the societies were technically in breach of the Act Against Oaths with their membership initiations and rituals. While the mission of the friendly societies was supported by politicians because it was seen as preventing workers from resorting to poor relief normally provided by the government or the local church parish, the secrecy of the society meetings was problematic, especially when there's suspicions of illegal union activity. The repeal of the Combinations Act in 1824 made trade unions legal technically, but union members were restricted in how they could act, and employers made employees sign agreements that prevented collective bargaining. Trade unions flourished after the law was passed, and strikes spread across Britain, in the mines, in the mills, and in the shipyards. Attempts to dismantle the legislation in 1825 failed, and the right to collective bargaining was gained. Despite this, the unions were still viewed with suspicion, and claims of conspiracy were frequently made against any groups of workers. As the number of trade unions grew, there was a movement to create national organizations. One of the largest of these was the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union. The National Union actively cultivated connections with friendly societies looking to build its membership. These relationships caught the attention of the government, varying the power that could be achieved by a national union. Informants were recruited to gather intelligence on the societies by infiltrating local meetings. In Dorset, 6 members of the Friendly Society of Agricultural Laborers swore an oath as part of a society ritual and were prosecuted under the old 1797 law against swearing oaths. The 6 laborers from the village of Tolpuddle were sentenced to 7 years transportation. 1 man was sent to Tasmania, and the other 5 landed in Sydney, with 3 men sent to work in the Hunter, New England area. You can see on the map there, them passing through the Newcastle jail and being spread throughout the colony. A campaign for the release of the men was referred to. The men were referred to as the Tolpuddle Martyrs. The campaign included a protest of 100,000 workers in London. We can see there in our slide the medallion for the Copenhagen Fields, and the picture for the Copenhagen Fields is at the bottom left there. You can see just workers as far as the eye can see. There were petitions brought before Parliament with 800,000 signatures. There were national demonstrations, and persistent action in Parliament on every day finally brought conditional pardons for the Tolpuddle Six in 1835, and then full pardons in 1836. The bottom picture there, the modern statue, you can see behind him there are 6 pillars that are there to represent the 6 martyrs, and that's George. That was the one that got sent to Hobart. He was too ill to make the journey. They thought he'd die in transit, so he was left behind by himself in jail until he was well enough to be transported. The Tolpuddle Martyrs are evidence of the fear of organized rebellion that endured in Britain long after the French Revolution. It showed the kind of fear that gripped the treatment of both trade unions and friendly societies as being someplace where their secrecy could be a hotbed for treason and sedition. Some claim that the release of the Tolpuddle Martyrs was a win in the battle for the labor unions, while others remember that their convictions slowed the progress of the national movement for years. Well, the most important to us, the secrecy, the rituals, robes, and parades that were part of the Friendly Society's culture, they offered members a sense of belonging and a sort of a fictive, tight-knit kinship when life was hard. The goals of the Friendly Society, economic security, sociability, respectability, these were all gained through association. They had tremendous appeal at a time when a homogeneous working-class consciousness was still developing. Through mutual aid, the Friendly Societies provided a minimum level of financial support that allowed their members to look after each other and help themselves. I hope this brief overview has provided some idea of the historical significance of the Friendly Societies, and I invite you to explore the collection in this exhibition to get a better idea of their impact here in Australia and in the Newcastle area. Thank you very much.